Welcome to the Explainer. So, when does a storm or a landslide stop being just a natural event and become a real catastrophe? Well, it turns out the answer might have less to do with nature itself and a whole lot more to do with us. Today, we're going to see exactly why by zooming in on one nation right on the front lines, Sri Lanka.
Okay, so let's jump right into this. It's a really fundamental question. We throw around words like hazard and disaster all the time, almost like they mean the same thing, but they don't. There's a huge difference, and it all boils down to one critical factor: people.
And this slide right here, this just lays it out perfectly. It frames the entire issue. A powerful natural process, like the ground suddenly giving way, is really just a hazard when it happens out in the middle of nowhere. It only becomes a disaster, a catastrophe, the moment it intersects with human life, with our homes, with our communities.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll lock in that key difference between a hazard and a disaster. Then, we'll dive into Sri Lanka as our case study to see these forces in action. We'll look at the human factor, which is huge, then explore how the world is shifting towards being prepared, and finally, we'll connect it all to the even bigger story of our global climate.
All right, let's get into it. Before we can really talk about Sri Lanka, we've got to make sure we're all on the same page with our terms. So what is the actual difference? So the key phrases to pull out of this are destructive force and, most importantly, significant impact on people and property. See, it's not just that something happened, it's that it happened and had terrible consequences for us. This definition is basically the lens we need to view everything else through.
Okay, now for part two. Let's take that idea and see how it works in the real world. For our case study, we're heading to the island nation of Sri Lanka.
So why Sri Lanka?
Well, its geography is kind of the perfect storm. It's a tropical island, you've got these central highlands, and then you have these long populated coastlines. All of that together makes it a natural hotspot for a whole bunch of different hazards. It's a place where the forces of nature are, just always part of the equation. And wow, this slide really just shows you the sheer scale of the challenge they're facing. We're not talking about a country that just has to worry about one thing, like, say, hurricanes. Nope. It's this whole menu of threats: droughts, floods, landslides, cyclones, you name it, and a lot of the time, they're happening at the same time, making everything worse.
So moving on, to try and make sense of this really complex picture, we're going to group these hazards by where they come from: water, wind, and, well, the earth itself. This is a truly cruel irony. For Sri Lanka, water is both a lifeline and a destructive force. The country is in this constant battle against having way too little water in some places, while at the same time being completely washed away by way too much of it in others. It's an incredible paradox. And this table just lays that paradox out so clearly. On one side, you have drought, right? It's driven by less rain and deforestation, and it leads to food shortages. But then, on the other side, you have floods caused by heavy rains and, again, clearing forests, leading to loss of life and property. Just two sides of the same coin, and both are devastating. So beyond water, the very ground they stand on can be a major threat. In the country's hilly central areas, landslides, or earth slips, as they're often called there, are a common and incredibly deadly type of disaster. We're talking about huge amounts of earth and rock just sliding down a slope. And the fallout from these things isn't simple. It just ripples through the entire community. An earth slip doesn't just destroy a house. It wipes out the farms people depend on, it blocks up rivers, it cuts off roads and communication, and it basically brings normal life to a complete stop. So, this all leads to a really important question. Are these disasters just acts of nature that we can't do anything about? Well, the source material points a finger at a very powerful amplifier: us. This quote right here, this is pretty much the core idea of our entire explainer. Natural hazards have always existed. That's nothing new. But our choices, human activities, are turning up the volume on them. In a lot of cases, we are the ones transforming a manageable hazard into a destructive, full-blown disaster. And this slide draws a straight, undeniable line from our actions to the consequences. When you clear forests on hillsides, that soil becomes unstable. When you block a river's natural path for construction, that water has to go somewhere. These actions are directly fueling more frequent, more intense floods and landslides. It's a very clear cause and effect. So, Section 5. When you're facing these bigger, badder threats, the old way of just cleaning up afterward, well, it just doesn't cut it anymore. The focus is shifting from simply reacting to disasters to proactively managing the risk before it even happens. And this three-step cycle shows a much smarter way of thinking about it. It all starts with preparedness, which is honestly the most hopeful part. This is where we can actually take some control by mapping out dangerous areas ahead of time, making sure the public knows the risks, building stronger homes, and protecting the forests that protect us. Then, of course, comes the response when disaster hits, which is all about saving lives. And finally, the long road to recovery, which is about rebuilding not just buildings, but people's lives and well-being. All right, for our last section, let's zoom all the way out. Because as important as all these local actions are, Sri Lanka's story isn't happening in a bubble. It's actually a really powerful chapter in a much bigger, global story that involves every single one of us. So all those vulnerabilities we've been talking about, the floods, the droughts, they're being stretched to the absolute breaking point by a problem on a planetary scale. A change in global climate is basically pouring gasoline on the fire of these local hazards. And the source material is pretty clear on what's driving this change. As you can see here, it points to major global activities, things like burning massive amounts of fossil fuels and large-scale deforestation, as the engine behind the atmospheric warming that's now hammering countries like Sri Lanka. And this chart does a fantastic job of showing how one giant global issue breaks down into a ton of severe local problems. I mean, look at it. Rising sea levels are hammering the coasts, the water cycle is going haywire, causing extreme weather, and public health suffers. It really touches every single part of society. So when you look at it like this, what's happening in Sri Lanka is so much more than a local story. It's a preview. It's an early warning sign of the kind of complex, tangled challenges that communities all over the world are just now starting to face. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that by understanding what's going on in this one nation, this combination of natural hazards, human actions, and climate change, we're basically getting a blueprint for our own shared future. And the question this slide asks, well, it's vital. Sri Lanka's story isn't just about Sri Lanka. It's a case study, for sure, but it's also a massive wake-up call for all of us.